RC Command leads the way. Nick here with another episode of So You Just Bought an RC Rock Bouncer, Now What Do I Do? Last episode we went over a couple of things that I feel were necessary. Definitely go back and check that episode out. But for this episode, Matt Higgins, I'm going to pass the torch over to you, brother, because I have got a ton of stuff to do to get ready to go to New Hampshire, and I flat out just don't have time to make this video. So Matt, thank you for your help.
What's up, Nick? Thanks for the invite. I'm excited to work alongside with you on this project here. For those of you who don't know me, I am Matt with Outbound RC. What we're going to be doing here is going to go race next weekend at Curtis Haddard's place in New Hampshire, King of the Mountain Series finals. And we're going to go through some race prep, get the buggies ready, and we're going to go through from right now all the way to racing on the hill. So everything that goes into from traveling there, the buggy itself, we're going to do some buggy breakdowns, and yeah, so just want to take you guys with me. All right, this is my 2022 National Race rig that I built over the last winter. It's a 4-wheel steer. It's fully skidless, full chassis. It has no skid whatsoever underneath. You can see that the motor is just simply there. Rate transmission on this one, although it is running rift axles, front and rear. One is a rear steer axle. I believe the front is a rear steer axle, and the rear is a front steer axle. Full Vidavon shafts. We've got MIP drive shafts, and the rear has been customized. That drive shaft has been lengthened using a collar. It seems to work just fine. Shift servos, front and rear. I've never really had a problem with the shift servos whatsoever. So I normally will run a Proline shock. And we'll get a little bit more in depth in shocks here a little bit later. These are some bomber trailing arms, or not trailing arms, sway bar arms. Although it does have a UDR torsion rod, just because I need a little bit more strength. Baja Pros, Mickey Thompson's, not really sure how I feel about them yet. We have a Mamba Monster ESC in this one. Trailing arms off of a Yeti XL. The leading arms are actually a bomber trailing arm. I absolutely love this buggy. Running rear steer, it's amazing how fast it will corner and not flip over as long as the rear is turned. I do have rear steer set up for anyone wondering. It's on this little switch on the rugged. And if I click it one way, it will simply go full block that way. Once I enter a corner at, I don't know, 15-20 miles an hour, I will click that full one way and then just simply use the front to adjust more or less steering as I enter through the corner. As soon as I let off of that button, it will recenter itself just like that really quickly, and yeah, you don't even know it's there once you get to using it. This is a really capable buggy, and I was really planning on taking it with me through this trip, but just after last nationals I went to, kind of disappointed to see what it did on the second hill. So I think we're going to switch it up, and we're going to take a whole different setup, and we'll get into that in just a second. This buggy here is basically a Rift kit, nothing too fancy going on. It does have the same Polar Pro 4100. It's got Vidavon trailing arms on there, plastic axles, but it does have beef tubes in them. And I've never really had a problem with them. They seem to hold up. Running the bomber sway bar arms, I got a ton of those. I like them, like the way they tuck in there, nice and clean. Running a UDR torsion rod though, because they are much thicker, much stronger. You'll notice plastic drive shafts. I've never had an issue with those. Of course, the Shift XC servo in the front end, and the same small little servo horn there. Plastic skid, nothing crazy. Proline, these are the 5-inch shocks, 120 millimeter, and lockers in all 3 diffs. Never had a problem with any of those, and running the Vidavon axle shafts. This buggy is much more capable as far as jumping ledges and speed, getting up steps and things than the other buggy. It seems to be lighter. The whole cage itself just weighs under a pound. The entire buggy weighs 7.5 pounds with a pretty heavy battery in it, ready to rock and roll. And we're going to go ahead and start tearing it down. We're going to do it, clean it up, pull the tires off of it, and we were out racing at the ATV park last weekend, so we've got some dirt on there to do. Get off of there, get all nice and clean for the nationals. So I'll bring you guys in for a short time lapse on that, and then I'll see you then.
Shawty switch on her baby like the seasons. Caught a lick, now she married to the visa. No zip, I just look European. No bitch, don't know nobody a reason. Yeah, pull up, hop out, show off that nobody. Ain't a drip, wave too big, it's a tsunami. Fine bitches in the whip, that's the crew, honey.
Alright, we're back with the race rig here that we're going to be taking. One thing I wanted to get a little involved with was some shocks. Talk a little bit about what I run and how I do so. So what I have here is some Pro Lines. These are the 5-inch ones. I figured just the most amount of shock is the most amount of travel and the most amount that buggy is going to be able to actually go forward under the best efficient amount of power. What we have, one of 20 millimeter. They come with a slider in the middle of them that has 2 holes in it, and what I will do is kind of a secret, is drill the holes out and or create more holes into that slider. And then I'll actually go around that slider and just sand it down by hand real quick. Make sure that it doesn't have any drag whatsoever inside that tube. And then fill it back up with some pretty thin oil. In the front I like to run anywhere from 10 to 20 weight, depending on the weight of the buggy. In the rear, we're talking a little bit more, maybe 20 to 30 weight, but still, we're trying to make the axles and each corner, this front end, move as much as possible so that that tire can stay contacted to the ground. It's a pretty light buggy. Try to stay light with this one. I feel like maybe the future is going to be lighter weight vehicles. Seem to work a little bit better. One last thing, tires. If these tires came this way, I would definitely buy them that way. It's a shame that they don't. I cut these tires before I even mount them in the mounting process, essentially cutting every other lug out of the tire itself. Tire preference is really depending on your location, where you're racing, what type of your ground you're racing on, the terrain. I have lots of loose dirt, overburden type hills around me. Not much rock, although I just get a little bit. And I love these RC 4-wheel drive mudslingers. They just seem to make the buggy drive forward the fastest around. The overall OD, outside diameter, is a little bit smaller than I would like at 5.5. However, it definitely makes the buggy move forward. The foams I have running are actually Crawler Innovations medium inner and medium outer. I don't really have too much of a preference on the foam, definitely depends on the weight of the buggy. And this buggy has enough RPM that it can actually balloon these tires out to 7 or 8 inches.
Too spicy in the summertime. Looking at my IG, catching butterflies. Booty in the tight jeans, he want another bite. Let him lick the ice cream after supper time. I might freeze him in the cold come wintertime. I might go ahead.
Alright, got the buggy all back together here and ready to rock and roll pretty much, besides a little bit of race prep. We're going to go through that now. Kind of a little bit of a list of what I do before I take this to any hill, whether it's a race or just even playing around. The first thing I'd like to check is the wheel nuts because they seem to come loose really quickly. Just basically tighten all the wheel nuts up. Next thing, you're going to do the servo horn. The servo horn's probably going to be loose on the end. They seem to loosen up pretty quickly. Next thing, we're going to move back a little bit. The drive shaft pins, we're going to make sure that those are tight. Last weekend I mentioned I was out racing, running around on the beach. I actually lost a drive shaft pin and killed the day. That was the end of it. We're going to look real closely at the joint in here in this axle shaft, just to make sure that when we shake this around, the joint doesn't have too much play. A little bit of play is probably going to be common, especially if you're running real hard. But if we get too much play in there, we're going to have to go ahead and replace those shafts. The sway bar, 90% of the time, that sway bar is going to be loose. It's just the way it is. I've got a nice, easy setup access to get to my sway bar. As you can see here, I've got the external hexes on there. That allows me to get a lot more torque than your average M2 M3 head. Because of that, they tend to hold on a little bit tighter for a little bit longer, but again, it's just going to come loose and it's inevitable. Quick check of the sway bar. Just lift the front of the buggy up and watch and make sure, see how much that the rear of the cage is tilting. If the front of the cage is, the front of the axle is tilting up, that's exactly what you want, but you don't want that rear tilting too much. The tighter the sway bar, the steeper the incline essentially you can hit. Lubrication. We're going to hit every spot that moves, basically, throughout the entire buggy. So that starts with the front end here. We're going to hit all the knuckles, the joints, the U-joints, everything. All these knuckles, the steering links, everything. Front forelink, all the way around. We're even going to hit the shafts, the U-joints on the drive shafts themselves, because, again, you never know what you hit last time you were out. Maybe the mud had a little bit of water in it, been sitting on it, and now surface rust is starting to form. So just prevent that by a little bit of silicone here. And then we're going to move to the back. I'm going to hit everything: sway bar mounts, the rear trailing arm links, and again the drive shaft, U-joints, front and rear. Again, the front end, or back to the front end, the shocks are essential. They do move, and the rear is not. They don't move as much, but the fronts, they are actually essential because they're angled slightly. So if they don't have a little bit of movement in here, then really it can bind up and cause you problems with the buggy actually just not running right. And not wanting to hit a ledge or a hill just right. That's pretty much it on the race prep. We got her all nice and lubed up. We got to make sure all the bolts are tight. She feels good, nice and smooth, rolls nice and smooth. You might just look at some beads on your wheels. Make sure that your wheels are not coming loose, or your tires are not coming loose, be beating off those wheels. So that's pretty much it on the buggy. It's nice and smooth. It wants to tilt front and rear. That's one of the things I will check for, is how much it likes to tilt front and rear. That'll tell you how much it will settle as it accelerates in the ground, how hard of an acceleration you can actually get out of it when the tires are contacting fully the entire time. So now we're going to move on to what I have in my parts bag that I bring on the hill normally. This little bag right here, it's a little DeWalt made bag, fits on my belt. I've got a bad back, so having a backpack is kind of difficult sometimes when I'm carrying it around, but this puts all the weight on my hips, so it definitely feels a lot better for me, especially. What I have in here, some spare parts. We're going to have some servo horns, wheel nuts. It's essential to have at least a dozen wheel nuts, in my opinion, because these things can just throw wheel nuts in a matter of minutes. Drive shaft pins. Always like the brand new ones that have the Loctite already on them, because the ones that you get and reuse, they just don't seem to hold up anymore like they did the first time. A little bit of bag here, miscellaneous washers. If I need to shim something, just in case, some more drive shaft pins, wheel hexes, some of the link ends. Some people will go through some link ends. I hear some people will go through them pretty quickly. I don't really go through them very often, or maybe I just wait until they're absolutely blown out to replace them. I don't know. I will shake the buggy around, kind of give her a shake, make sure that everything feels semi-tight and nothing crazy worn out before I run it every time. And one thing I have in here is a tap. Very essential. I have custom link ends that I use. I use a 3/16 rod, the same rod that I use to build the chassis with, to make the links, custom links. That way they can be whatever length that I want. Inside of here we have some axle shafts. Again, I don't plan on having to replace them, but just in case, I can rebuild, essentially rebuild an axle on the hill if I needed to. As we go to the front end here, we've got some bits for a screwdriver. That same screwdriver, I recommend this factory team screwdriver, bit driver. I would recommend having a couple different screwdrivers, a couple different sizes, or a couple of each size, just in case you snap one off. Needle nose pliers, These are the only pliers I actually will carry with me. I don't think I need anything else. I will occasionally bring an electric screwdriver with me if I feel like maybe something's going to happen. If I need to rebuild something crazy, if I don't have much time, it's very quick, on off, I can swap a link in a matter of just a minute. The battery that I will run, first of all, the lipo case, very essential. I have one case per battery that I own. What I run, I've been running for a long time, started with a 4100 milliamp ProTech 3S. They have now increased that size to a 4800 milliamp. 130C seems to give me a plenty of punch off the line buggy. Well, that will get us wrapped up here for what I bring on the hill and some parts that I recommend having, some tools and whatnot. Next week, I'm going to do a little bit of test and tune on the hill, and then we'll do a little bit of a bolt check, what that looks like on the hill as well, because that's a little bit different than what you would do at home. Then we're going to pack it up, get on a plane, and we're gonna go halfway across the United States and race RC cars. It sounds crazy to me. I still really don't believe it, but yeah, it's been planned out for a long time now. I'm really excited, looking forward to this. Well, we'll see you on the next one.